let's take it to our debate tonight. The debate, of course, is how much of this disaster is man-made. Of course, the tragedy is a result of nature's wrath, but how much of that anger has been provoked as a result of flawed policies and complacency? We heard a combative Chief Minister there. Let's introduce our panel this evening. We're joined by R.K. Pachauri. He's, of course, one of the world's foremost commentators and experts on the environment as well as on climate change. We're also joined from Bangalore tonight by Rohini Nilekani. She's an activist and a well-known commentator who spent some time in Uttarakhand. And Mr. Bahuguna was not being very complimentary about activists, of course, there. So we'll ask her a little bit about what she felt about that. And with us in the studio is well-known commentator Pushpesh Pant, who, of course, also knows these hills like the back of his hand. And they are your homeland as well. Let me take this to you, Mr. Pachauri. You're hearing Mr. Bahuguna going on arguing that there cannot be this kind of stridency by environmental activists, that none of this was actually compounded by flawed policies or by buildings built right on the river. Is that actually accurate? Can we stand back here and pat ourselves on the back and say that we have not contributed to this unfolding tragedy?
Well, I really wouldn't want to pass any judgment on that statement, but let me say two things. Firstly, I think we have to be guided by knowledge. I have the privilege of chairing the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, and we mobilized the most distinguished scientists from all over the world. And 2 years ago, we brought out a special report on extreme events and disasters, which clearly stated that extreme precipitation events are going to increase both in terms of frequency and intensity. Now, I'm not saying that this incident is the result of human-induced climate change, but I would want to say that this is an example of the kind of event that you're going to see in much greater frequency and intensity in the future. Yeah. So the second point I'd like to make is, let's learn from this. I think it's become increasingly clear that if we want to protect the lives and property of people in that region and other parts of the country, then we have to put in place adaptation measures. What are these adaptation measures? Early warning signs. Now, early warning has to be acted on. You really can't treat it as something which is purely a piece of news.
But Mr. Pachauri, you heard the Chief Minister saying, if I may interrupt you there on early warnings, you heard the Chief Minister saying that when the Weather Department said extremely severe rain, he did not take that as a specific warning. He said you evacuate Delhi when you get a warning of extreme rain. Now, I mean, I don't think Delhi and the hills are comparable to begin with.
Well, the point is that, as I said, you've got to learn from this tragic incident. And I think it's absolutely clear that knowledge from science tells us that these events are going to become much more frequent and much more intense. So when you get a warning, then I think you've got to have in place a mechanism and a set of processes by which you take immediate action. That's not there at this point of time, and I don't blame anybody, because this may have occurred after 50 years or 100 years, but let's accept the fact that this is going to happen far more frequently than we have experienced in the past. And I also want to say that there's an extremely important response that we have to put in place, and that relates to local regulations and their implementations.
Yeah.
I think local bodies have to ensure that structures, buildings, tourism facilities don't come up in places which are going to be at heavy risk, because you have to protect lives and property. And in my view, development is not merely constructing more buildings and constructing more roads. Development is about ensuring the well-being and the safety of the people.
Let me take this
therefore,
sir, you made some very important points.
Certainly, we have to promote development activities, but please, for heaven's sake, let's look at where the risks are going to be high, where the vulnerability of the people and their property is going to be extremely high.
But the problem, sir, is that we don't respond to this till there is a crisis, and we live from crisis to crisis. Pushpesh Pant, you heard what the Chief Minister said. He kind of dismissed this environmental activism.
I'm shocked, and I think we are talking of eco-sensitive zones. Yeah. I wish we had a more sensitive Chief Minister. I found particularly hilarious his use of the first person singular. I can tell you this, I can't tell you that, I'm doing this, I'm doing that. What we are seeing is what the Jawans, what your news report very clearly brings out, the ITBP, the Air Force, and the Army.
They're actually replacing the administration. They're doing what the administration can't afford.
They are the only people present, and the local administration and the state government hasn't exactly covered itself in glory. Mr. Bahuguna is living in a fool's paradise if he thinks aggression is the best form of defense. This was the gentleman who was trying, with all the BJP leaders as well, in tow, to withdraw the notification about the eco-sensitive
He says
zones.
it's a unanimous resolution by the Uttarakhand Assembly.
And I think he was totally at loss for words today. When you ask him, I have heard of various things. He's abusing the environmentalists, but he comes out with a new formulation of glacier bursts. And, you know, a funny part of a natural lake having embankments. And of course, the problem is that is he looking for an astrological prediction of the Falit Jyotish of the ancient variety of the Devaprayag Vedashala, where some Jyotish will tell him that the rain will specifically strike at a particular point. I mean, I think the meteorological predictions...
What should he have done with those Met predictions?
He should have immediately taken steps to stop the movement, and he's talking of the flights being stopped. Do you think that 72,000 tourists and pilgrims have reached Uttarakhand on his officially sponsored heli-hops?